Assalamu alaikum dear students, welcome to Dr. Roomi lectures. As you know, cortisol is a very important stress hormone. Let's study how the concentration of cortisol or glucocorticoid is regulated in our blood. Just like we have studied in case of thyroid gland, there is hypothalamus, anterior pituitary and then target organ and that make an axis. And similar axis is involved in regulation of cortisol hormone. This is hypothalamus, H, anterior pituitary, P, and adrenal cortex, A. So AHPA axis is involved in the regulation of cortisol secretion. In hypothalamus, there is a nucleus which is called as paraventricular nucleus. This nucleus produces a peptide hormone which is called as corticotropin releasing factor or corticotropin releasing hormone. This hormone is released close to the median eminence. The blood vessels or capillaries there, they pick this corticotropin releasing hormone, and through the hypophyseal portal circulation, this hormone enters into the anterior pituitary, where it acts on the corticotroph cells of the anterior pituitary. The mechanism of action of corticotropin releasing hormone on the corticotroph cells of the anterior pituitary is through cyclic AMP pathway. Corticotropin releasing hormone acting on the corticotroph cells of the anterior pituitary directs the synthesis of a large protein molecule which is called as POMC, pro-opiomelanocortin. It's a large protein molecule which can be split to make different peptide hormones. One of them is adrenocorticotropic hormone. Another one is beta-lipotropin, which can be broken down to make melanocyte stimulating hormone and endorphins. I hope you already remember beta endorphin along with dynorphin and enkephalin are opiate peptides which are important messengers for natural pain suppression system or analgesia system of the body. So it means they have a role to modulate pain. They decrease our sensitivity to pain. Coming to the function of adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH is also called as corticotrophin. It acts on the zona fasciculata and zona reticularis, which are middle and the inner zones of the adrenal cortex. As ACTH is also a peptide hormone, its mechanism of action is through cyclic AMP second messenger system. ACTH within its target cells increases the synthesis of an enzyme which is called as cholesterol desmolase. This enzyme cholesterol desmolase speeds up the conversion of cholesterol to pregnenolone, and this is a rate limiting step in the synthesis of glucocorticoids, that is cortisol and androgens. It's important to note that ACTH hormone also upregulates receptors of the target cells within zona fasciculata and zona reticularis, hence increasing the sensitivity of cells in these two zones and increasing the secretion from the target cells. As ACTH hormone is a tropic hormone for the inner two zones of adrenal cortex, if there is chronically elevated level of ACTH hormone, for example in case of some pituitary tumor that increases the production of ACTH hormone, that will cause hypertrophy of the adrenal cortex. So by the action of ACTH hormone, there is increase in production of cortisol hormone from the adrenal cortex. Whenever the cortisol level is high, that will have negative feedback effect on the anterior pituitary and also on the hypothalamus. And in this way, by this double negative feedback loop, it will decrease the release of corticotropin releasing hormone and adrenocorticotropic hormone from hypothalamus and from anterior pituitary respectively. And similarly, when there will be decrease in concentration of cortisol in our blood, then through this negative feedback effect, there will be increase in production of ACTH hormone and CRH hormone from anterior pituitary and from hypothalamus respectively. Although this negative feedback mechanism which exists between hypothalamus, anterior pituitary and the adrenal cortex, it's important to regulate the cortisol secretion. However, there are two important mechanisms which can override this negative feedback effect. One of them is stress and the other one is circadian rhythm. First, let's talk about the diurnal variation or the circadian rhythm. The secretion of CRH and ACTH and also cortisol oscillate with a 24-hour periodicity. For those who sleep at night and work during the day, the release of CRH and ACTH and cortisol hormone is maximum early in the morning, for example at 8 a.m. And during late evening, for example at 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. when we are just going to sleep, their levels are minimum. The average concentration of cortisol in our blood is about 12 microgram per deciliter. However, early in the morning at 8 a.m., its concentration can be as high as 20 micrograms per deciliter. So it means it rises early in the morning, and at late evening time or at early night, there is minimum level or low level of cortisol level. It can be as low as 5 micrograms per deciliter. And those who have shift work and work during night and sleep during the day, they have opposite, which means they have higher cortisol production at night time and minimum cortisol production during the daytime when they are sleeping. So these diurnal variations in the secretion of cortisol hormone are important when we are measuring the level of cortisol in our blood. So if you are a doctor and checking the report of cortisol level in a patient, you should know at what time of the day sample was drawn. For example, if sample was drawn at 8 a.m. in the morning, the cortisol level will be towards the higher limit. And if the sample was drawn towards the evening time, then the cortisol level will be towards the lower limit. So which part of brain is important to control the circadian rhythm? This is suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is a nucleus of hypothalamus. This is also called as master biological clock of our brain. So this suprachiasmatic nucleus sends signals about time of the day to our paraventricular nucleus, and then that increases the production of corticotropin releasing hormone. The other important factor which can override the HPA negative feedback system is stress, and stress of any kind, whether psychological stress or physical stress, can stimulate the paraventricular nucleus. These signals of stress, they come mainly from the limbic system of brain. As you know, limbic system is emotional nervous system, and some important part of this limbic system are amygdala and hippocampus, which send signal about the emotions, about pain, about stress to the hypothalamus, and then paraventricular nucleus increases corticotropin releasing hormone in response to stress. Some examples of stress in response to which the cortisol level may increase are infections, hypoglycemia, pain, trauma, fracture, injections, exposure to cold, and exercise. As cortisol has negative feedback effect on the anterior pituitary and also on the hypothalamus to decrease excretion of CRH from the hypothalamus and ACTH from the anterior pituitary. So this is why when we are giving exogenous glucocorticoids, for example dexamethasone and prednisone, these are some important examples of potent exogenous glucocorticoids. If they are given for months to a patient, then what can happen? Through negative feedback, there will be decrease in release of CRH and ACTH, and then they decrease the stimulation of adrenal cortex, and there may be atrophy of adrenal gland, and the natural production of glucocorticoids or cortisol from the adrenal cortex will be decreased. This concept of negative feedback relationship between adrenal cortex and anterior pituitary and hypothalamus is important to understand dexamethasone suppression test. Dexamethasone is a synthetic, very potent glucocorticoid hormone. In a normal person, when low dose of dexamethasone is given, that acts just like natural glucocorticoids and can suppress the secretion of ACTH from anterior pituitary, and hence the release of cortisol from the adrenal cortex is decreased. Those persons who are having tumors of anterior pituitary which has increased release of ACTH secretion, they cannot be suppressed by the low dose of dexamethasone, because low dose of dexamethasone is not good enough to provide enough negative feedback to suppress the secretion of ACTH. However, this ACTH in case of anterior pituitary tumor can be suppressed by giving high dose of dexamethasone, because high dose will provide enough negative feedback that even the tumor of anterior pituitary will suppress the release of ACTH. And those patients who are having tumors of the adrenal cortex which are producing a lot of cortisol hormone, for example in case of Cushing syndrome, they cannot be suppressed by the low dose of dexamethasone or even the high dose of dexamethasone. So just to summarize, normal persons can decrease the secretion of ACTH and hence the cortisol from the adrenal cortex with low dose of dexamethasone. And those who are having tumor of the anterior pituitary and increasing the production of ACTH hormone, their ACTH secretion can be suppressed by high dose of dexamethasone but not with low dose of dexamethasone. And those who are having tumor of the adrenal cortex, this tumor of adrenal cortex is not under any negative feedback control. So we cannot suppress the secretion of cortisol hormones from this tumor of adrenal cortex neither with low dose of dexamethasone nor with high dose of dexamethasone. There are various diseases related to the excess and deficiency of adrenocortical hormones. One of them is Addison's disease. In Addison's disease, there is deficiency of mineralocorticoids and also glucocorticoids. So when there is deficiency of glucocorticoid hormone cortisol in Addison's disease, By negative feedback, it increases the secretion of ACTH hormone. Sometimes you may be asked in examination why these persons having Addison disease have pigmentation of their skin and mucous membranes. The answer to these questions can be found by looking at the synthesis of ACTH hormone. The common precursor protein, which is pro-opiomelanocortin, is a pre-pro hormone. So when this splits, it makes different types of peptide hormones. One of them is ACTH, another one is beta-lipotropin, which then splits and makes melanocyte-stimulating hormone and beta-endorphin. So in any condition in which there is increase in ACTH production, there is also increase in melanocyte-stimulating hormone synthesis. And because these persons of Addison's disease, not only they have increase in ACTH level, they also have increase in MSH level. And this MSH hormone, melanocyte stimulating hormone, stimulates the melanocytes of our epidermis. That increases the dark pigment, melanin in our skin, and hence the pigmentation of skin and mucous membrane occurs. Moreover, ACTH hormone also has some melanocyte stimulating hormone activity. And because the concentration of ACTH hormone rises too much, so this has significant melanocyte stimulating effect, hence further adding to the skin pigmentation. So this is the explanation why the persons with Addison disease have darker skin as compared to normal persons. So just to summarize, the negative feedback present between hypothalamus anterior pituitary and adrenal axis, this is important to control the normal secretion of cortisol hormone in our blood. And this negative feedback mechanism which exists between hypothalamus, pituitary and adrenal cortex can be overridden by stress and also by diurnal variations. It's important to note that cortisol hormone level is maximum when we wake up early in the morning, and its level is minimum when we are just going to sleep, like at 10 p.m. Paraventricular nucleus of the hypothalamus releases corticotropin releasing hormone, and this is suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus, which gives signal about the time of the day. So this is the biological clock of the body to the paraventricular nucleus for releasing corticotropin releasing hormone. And corticotropin releasing hormone is carried to the anterior pituitary through portal blood vessels called as hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal circulation. The corticotroph cells of the anterior pituitary, they increase the production of ACTH hormone, which acts on the zona fasciculata and zona reticularis of the adrenal cortex to increase the production of glucocorticoid. And the major glucocorticoid in our body is cortisol hormone. It's important to note that CRH hormone from the hypothalamus and ACTH hormone from the anterior pituitary, because they are peptide hormone, so their mechanism of action is by acting on the receptors present in the cell membrane of their target cells, and both of them have second messenger, which is cyclic AMP. But cortisol hormone, because it's a steroid hormone, it has the mechanism of action of lipophilic hormone, which means it affects the transcription of the messenger RNA and then the synthesis of new proteins. I hope this control of cortisol secretion is clear to you. Thank you so much for watching this video. See you next time with another video.